Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Creators Outlet, right here on the Outright Geekery Network. And we're joined by a couple of creators from over the pond, as they like to say. Straight out of London, they've been working on the John Carpenter line, Vortex 2.0. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello there.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, so why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and give us a little bit of background on how you got to where you are now in the creative world.
Let's do it this way. This is Mike. He's the writer on Vortex 2.0. Mike's approximately 5'11", pushing 6 foot, I'd say. Handsome, faster than me, and he lives in London, and I live as far away from him as possible. Over to you, Mike.
Sums it up, yeah. Dave, below me, literally lives in a basement. We actually went to school together, weirdly enough, and then we lost touch for like 18 years, something like that. And a mutual friend got back in touch, and we reconnected. And I was already writing by then, and Dave was doing art, and it just seemed natural that we try and put those skills together. And we started working on a few things over here, and one thing led to another. We ended up in John and Sandy's orbit, and they asked us to do a few things with them. So we've done a bunch of shorts for them on their Tales for Halloween Night series, and we did a book a couple of years ago now called Vortex, and we just about got to the end of Vortex 2.0.
Yeah, one more issue left. As I was telling Mike, I lost count of how many times I yelled out "Holy fuck!" flipping the pages because she sent me like the last 4 issues.
Sweet.
To catch up on, and I'm like, I can jump in in the middle of the story, and figure a little bit out for myself, so I kind of know what's going on. And
well, it was designed. It was designed exactly like that.
Yeah, I think I read the first.
You don't really have to have read Vortex, although there is a really nice trade paperback of that now. But you can jump in, really, and no spoilers. Obviously, it's a nice happy ending. No one dies in any of my books.
Yeah, it's
everyone's
really
perfectly happy.
Yeah, it's nice and bloodless. I think that's part of the joy of comics, though. You pick something up and it's in the middle of something. Mm-hmm. You're just as interested to go back and see how you got there as you are to continue the story. So that's kind of the nice thing about people jumping on halfway through, I think.
Yeah, I think it's great. There's like a lot of smaller press and indie books are making like quite an impact. Like in 2020, the indie scene seemed to blow up. And a lot of pros, they're all all the pros are all freelance.
Yeah.
So they a bunch of them wandered over and just started. Why should I ask a publisher permission to do this project? I'm just going to do it on my own. And they launch on. And one of the coolest things that they've been doing that I've seen in projects is, for a nominal fee, they'll put you on a cover of a book, and it'll be like a one-of-one thing, or they'll draw you into the book.
I've got to admit to sneaking a couple of mates in there, just so I can say they were killed in the John Carpenter universe. It doesn't cost much. It's only $10,000 to get your face on a panel. If anybody's interested, just don't tell Sandy or John.
Yeah, they're not going to watch this, even though I tagged them in it. They'll be like, yeah, nice click.
I think one of the nice things as well is that although Dave and I are both kind of British and we've done British books and indie books, working with Storm King and John and Sandy is that they kind of team us up with some of the bigger names that have been doing this for forever. So we've got Tim Bradstreet doing the covers, which is just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
And our letter, Janice is I mean, she's worked on everything. I mean, talking to Janice about the stuff she's worked on is just mind blowing, and she continues to work on that stuff. I don't know how she manages to get it all done, but it helps us, I think, because we know that we're working with kind of real professionals. We've got to up our game. You can't half-ass it.
Yeah, listen, hooked me up with Guy Dorian Sr. Last year, so we had a nice chat, and also Frank from Heavy Metal, and so it's been fun for me, because when if we weren't having these, what are we, 2020 chapter 2 now, if this wasn't going on, I'd be going to as many Comic-Cons as I could. Yeah, and I don't go wandering around to like the celebrity part of it. I go in. I'm there for the comics, so I'm there in Artist Alley. I'm talking to the illustrators, the writers. So now I get to do this from the comfort of my home.
Yeah,
I can either sneak in a nice cold one on the side, or just have a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
with nothing else in it. And
depends what time it is.
Well, it's 4:00 someplace. Hey, it's 4:00 here.
Yeah, that's why I got this bottle of wine right here.
Something with bubbles.
Yeah. I like this whole remote thing. I mean, I was sort of geared towards it anyway. I used to work in the games industry and commute into like the local city and stuff, and it was never for me. 10 years of sitting on a cramped train where you can't sit down and, it's just full of bodily gas. It's not for me. So as soon as I got the opportunity to sort of jump out and work from home and manage my own time, Mike got me that opportunity with some like previous work that we did. So even if, COVID wasn't battering us to death in terms of lockdown and stuff like that, I'd still be at home. I mean, it's not much of a change for me. I don't go out anyway.
Yeah.
I haven't used my legs for 5 years. I'm not sure I've got any anymore, but
a lot of creators are like, well, it just gives me more time to work on stuff and perfect the things I'm doing. Liz wants to know what game you worked on.
Basically I worked on like the marketing for games. So we'd talk to people like Capcom UK and what's the other one who did Red Dead? Rockstar, that's the name. And we'd come up with the marketing campaign that would sell those games and then do like the covers and stuff like that. So it was purely artwork on our part. So there's a few Resident Evil ones, and Dead Rising 2 was one of the main ones I did. Managed to sneak myself in on the cover as a cop with his brains being half eaten. It's one of my nice little claims to fame. Gets me in a lot of doors, that.
You draw yourself into the covers of the video games.
Yeah, I did it wherever I could. I think I had myself puking on another one on some kind of fairground ride. Again, with my brains exposed, I must have, something inbuilt to enjoy that. It was fun. You got to look at a lot of very disturbing internet imagery for reference when doing zombie games. But it all goes in, and it's all stocked away in the library, ready to work on John's stuff.
Well, I mean, Vortex is a nice romantic comedy with hardly any death or destruction, or so you don't need any of that stuff today. It's just flowers and dancing mostly.
Just all beautiful people and coffee houses.
Oh, I love coffee houses. They kick me out, but
It is one of the fun things, though, is because Dave and I now have worked together for quite a few years, so we've kind of got shorthand. And the few times I work with someone else, there's a lot more back and forth trying to explain exactly what I need. And Dave and I kind of grew up watching the same stuff, so our references tend to be very similar anyway. But I also know I can ask Dave to draw the most disgusting things that I can think of, and he manages to do them in a kind of beautiful way, if that makes sense. Like the imagery he comes up with it's not just gore for the sake of gore. It's like there's always like just the angles you pick. Or I'm fascinated by that actually, because
I listened to another podcast over here which deals with indie comic creators in the UK, the Awesome Comics podcast.
Oh yeah,
they were just talking about this type of thing recently. This sort of unwritten, like the rules to reading comics. Like you don't know you know them, but you know them because you've been around them since you were a kid. It's like my wife learned to swim when she first came over here from Japan, and it was the oddest thing to have to take apart how you swim and tell somebody else something that you do instinctively and naturally. And I find it's quite similar with comics. It's very difficult to tell somebody else how you choose the angle in a panel. Like Mike, for example, will write two people are conversing in a panel. This one's got a facial expression. And I've found my journey going through comics and learning how to put a page together. I'm still doing it. I'm still learning now, like years down the line, that, I have to think about the room. I have to think where everybody is in the room. I have to think how the next page is going to go. If someone's going to leave the room dramatically, how am I going to get them to leave the room? How am I going to make sure that the reader's eye will follow them? And there was a little documentary on Disney Plus. I think it's only about like 30 minutes or something, about Dan Slott and his day, sort of like using the Marvel method, writing and handing things over to the artist and then getting it back and working on that. And he was saying stuff like how everybody adds to something. Now, there are times where I've drawn something and I'll hand it back to Mike and say, we actually need to change something here to make this work, because the only visual way I can deal with it, the way I can process it, means that what you've written needs to be broken up or something. But Dan Slott said something about the letterer as well. As soon as you bring the letterer in, it's incredible how much it ties everything together. Everything that Mike's worked on, everything that I've worked on, everything that Pete, my brother who does the colouring, everything that we've all put together still looks like the separate bits until Janice drops it all in. And there's a rhythm to how she does that too, how your eye is going to go around the page. And we all know this because we've all read comics since we were kids. But if you get someone, I've got friends who don't read comics and they genuinely don't know how to go down a page. They don't know where to look next. If I want to test my work by showing it to somebody who has no idea how to read a comic, I've got a couple of those mates, and I'll pass it to them. And if they can make sense of it, then hopefully everybody can, But there is that unwritten language that I don't think a few writers have done that. Was it Scott McCloud? Is it? He did the deconstruction of like comics and stuff. I never remember the name of his book. I'm probably going to get crucified for that. But that sort of like unwritten thing, we've all got it, I think.
Yeah, and there's a way to go about it, and I mean, you learn it at like at the age of like 4 or 5, as you're like, okay, skipping over the big words that you don't understand and just stick to the little ones when you're like 4 years old. And I used to skip the narration boxes too, because I'm like, I don't want to read that much. And
they're like,
yeah, but you figure it out when you're little, and I don't even think about that.
Well, one question I should have asked you this ages ago. I never seem to get around to it, but the way you've worked in the past have you found it like massively different to how you work on comics in terms of, working on script writing and stuff like that?
Not really. I mean, my background was TV and film scripts, it's a slightly different feel to how you put it together, but it's also different in that when you sit down and learn how to write a TV script or a movie script, there are a lot of rules. There's a certain way these things have to look. There isn't really that with comics. I've read so many comic scripts, and some of them have got the tiniest amount of detail in them for the artist. And then you've got like an Alan Moore script from the 80s, and it's like a novel, the amount of stuff he's asking to get into a panel. And just the formatting, everything's different. Everyone seems to just make it up in their own way. And now there's enough people online sharing scripts that I think it's starting to get into more of a, well, this is how they're supposed to look. But to be honest, as long as the artist gets the implication of what you're trying to get across, I've kind of streamlined it for Dave. What I find working with other people is I have to put a little bit more detail in sometimes, or it gets away from us a little bit more. But there's not a whole lot of difference, to be honest, between the way that I would write a TV or a movie scene than how I'm asking you to draw something. It's the same thing that I wouldn't be asking you don't ask the director, or you don't tell the director for a TV or a film script and you're going to put the camera here and you're going to position it, because that's their job. You are throwing enough information in front of them so that they can get an idea in their head, and then they work out exactly how they're going to block it and shoot it. And I think that's exactly what you do, because I do have a version in my head of how something's going to look, but 9 times out of 10 you will make it better than how I imagined it to be. And again, going back to Tim, who does our covers, he's the one that I probably have the least interaction with, because I just see the covers when they're done. And he manages to read an issue in script form without seeing any of Dave's work. And he will find what he thinks is the key element of that issue, and that will become the cover. And he nails it every time. And if I was to try and suggest it, well, I mean, I wouldn't try and tell Tim, I think the central theme of this issue is this, and you should put it on the cover. He just picks it out, and it works.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. His work's amazing, and so is yours. The interiors on this book are like mind-blowing.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, look at my ability. Sorry, Mike. I was just going to say, observe my ability to be terrible at taking compliments. Oh, shucks. But thanks anyway. Well, it's very kind of you.
I mean, one of the things I do with Dave is I always try every issue to give him enough space to get kind of the big full page moments that you need. But even with that stuff though, Dave will sometimes come back to me and say, actually, we need to break this up a little bit and find a slightly different rhythm and pick out a different element that then becomes that, whether it's a hero shot or a big moment where you turn the page and someone's head's exploding, or so
there's also, like, just going off from what Mike said there. Sorry, Mike. It's nice that we know that at the other end of the chain, when everything is reaching Sandy and John, that there's enough trust from them in what we do for them to basically say, listen, just get on with what you're doing. Don't get me wrong, everybody puts eyes on the work at the end of the day to check over what we've done. And, all of us have an input in that way. And it's kind of nice that we all do. There may be something that my brother Pete's really good at spotting. There was a character in the first trade, and he's got a scar on his head, and he gets the scar in the second issue, and I missed the scar off every single time I drew him, and I thought, how can I keep doing this? It's psychotic. But I'd get my brother like giving me a knock. There's no scar, Dave, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. But if everyone's got eyes on it, it's kind of nice knowing you're part of a team who's looking out for the others. And when that comes right down from the top, when that comes right down from Sandy and John, who are the guys who are putting the book out at the end of the day, and they've got trust in us to be malleable with it, they're happy with, they get the script off Mike first. That's the first thing they see. But by the time the book gets to them, there may be like all kinds of changes. We've added pages in the past. We've taken them away in the past. Added panels, taken away panels, introduced text, whatever. And they're always cool with it because they know it serves the story. They know that as we're making it, we may find something in the story that we think, you know what, this would look really good if it was a splash page, or this doesn't need to do that, or we need to get something on the turn of the page or something. And they're great at that, at just letting us get on with it. Who's that shouting, "That bloody scar"? Oh, I know that is.
There's a good example of exactly that, because the way the process works with John and Sandy is you've got to go right back to the beginning of this before I start writing anything. Is the conversation with John and Sandy about what it is we're going to do, and going all the way back to before the first Vortex book. We were talking about some of John's influences and Sandy's influences when we went all the way back to the 50s. And one of the things that the first book was supposed to have in it was a kind of nod to the old TV show The Fugitive that was remade so well with Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. But part of that initial conversation was the story of a guy who's he's framed and he's on the run. And by the time we got to writing the book and getting the scripts ready for Dave, that element had not only become so small, it had fallen away and it isn't really in there anymore. But it was part of the original genesis of the story. And it was one of the reasons we wanted to do Vortex 2, was to kind of reconnect that thread, because it was something we were really excited about. But as the original story of Vortex developed, we kind of laid some of the groundwork for that. But we brought in an investigator who was then supposed to be chasing the guy, and they ended up teaming up against the big bad in it. It went in a direction that wasn't on paper in those original discussions with John and Sandy, and they just trusted us to take that story where it needed to go. And then when we were talking about whether we needed to do a sequel, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to do it. We just wanted to pick that thread up, that earlier idea of putting a good guy in a position where people think he may be a bad guy, and seeing what that did to all the other elements that were going on with the monsters and the spaceships and the explosions. But all of the stuff that I work on with John and Sandy comes from that. We go all the way back to the stuff that got John excited. When he was a kid in the cinema watching a movie for the first time. So that's all part of the fun of putting the books together.
Yeah, when I was reading it today, yesterday and today. Well, more so today, like the last couple, 6 and 7 I read today, and a couple of scenes in it, I was just like, this is John Carpenter's thing in space.
Yeah. But there's no getting away from the fact that we know we're working for and with John Carpenter, so it's his name that is on the front of the book. We've got to live up to that. We've got to do it as best we can. I get that sense from what Mike passes over. I try and infuse it with what I do. Pete will think, what kind of coloration are we going to need on this scene, because it's going to be horrible. Do we go nice and bright, or is it all purple or something like that? And John's an influence on that as well. Everything he's done has got that visual element, so it feeds what we do. And I don't know about you, but I've lost count of how many times I've sat and watched The Thing. So it's embedded, there's no getting away from the fact that he is influencing us, and now we're trying to do the same for him in a way.
I think I wore out that movie on VHS twice.
Yeah.
It was one of the first horror movies I ever saw. We weren't even supposed to be watching it. We also my friend Dennis, he had his parents had bought like one of those split level homes, so you walk up. Downstairs is like the bedrooms, and upstairs is like the kitchen and the living room. Right. And the living room was like right off the stairs. So there were like seven or eight of us, and we were like 8, 9 years old, and we're all like at the stairs like this, peeking through, watching the movie.
Oh, that's a nice dog. Jesus.
And it was, it just stuck into my brain, and I'm like, yeah, I want to watch more of that.
Yeah, well, I know. Mike probably was watching like hardcore death movies before he even got to The Thing when he was a kid. But in terms of me bumping into that film, my older brother used to do his best to make my life hell. He was known throughout the family as the Needle, because he would just be going at me like this for his entire life. And him and his friends hired the thing from the video store just to upset me because I was like 3 years younger. So they said, "Hey, Dave, we've got this film. Do you want to chuck in for it, and we'll go and watch it together?" So I'm sitting there thinking I'm really cool with all my big brother's friends, and the dog bursts, and every one of them left. And I'm sat there watching this going, "This is great." And it's firing the tentacles out, and I'm shouting, "It's spitting acid on him. It's spitting acid." And none of them had come back in the room. And I don't think till today my brother likes horror movies anymore, but I had a great time, so stuff him.
I have to admit, one of the fun things I do know is there are whole YouTube channels devoted to younger people who've never seen certain movies before. And I search out the ones for John's movies, and it's so much fun. And you're getting like some 20-year-old who has no idea what he's in for. Kind of, he'll talk about the Marvel movies that he's just seen and what a fan he is of some new horror movie that's just not very frightening at all. Mm-hmm. And then you watch them try and work out what is happening in the thing because they have no idea. They don't even know what it's about. They start getting creeped out when the dog's walking down the corridors, but they have no clue what's about to happen to them. And it's one of my favorite things on YouTube is to watch people just freak out. And the fact that those films still have that power is wonderful.
Watch some 20-year-old scream and piss himself at the same time. So,
yeah,
that's gonna give you a thrill right there.
Yeah,
you can operate a smartphone, but you can't go without doing that.
and think about that's everybody who's working on that were all, as far as I'm concerned, firing on all cylinders, top of their game. The effects crew and the music and just everything, and we've got to live up to that. We've got John's name on the front of the book. We've got to do our best. So Mike writes a scene where, in the first book, where somebody's got to infect someone in another way, and he's written it in a particular way that something's forming out of the parts of somebody else, and I must have done that page, I don't know, 6 or 7 times because I couldn't get to that horrible feeling that you get from the thing or the good stuff that John made back in the day, where you're looking at it thinking, it's not doing it for me, and if it's not doing it for me, then it's not going to do it for the reader. Mm-hmm. And so I just kept going at it, and it was just trying to make a face out of guts coming together, and then them guts are going inside someone else's guts. And at one point, it just finally clicked. I thought, oh, and you can work on something for days and still be staring at it, and then suddenly something clicks, and you go, oh yeah, I don't like that, therefore I do like it, and so it's going in, But it's also got to you send it back to everybody else, and you've got to get that reaction from them too. There's numerous times where I've said, how's this to Mike, Pete, Janice, everybody, and somebody might say it's not working, but it's my job to make it work. I'm not going to take offense at that. That's great feedback. That's something I can work with. That's something I can get my teeth into. If I know it's not working, I'll probably already know myself it's not working. And the fun bit is making it work, And we've got all that back catalogue in the back of our brains ready to go to inform that, which is nice.
And the music, of course, is the other thing I was going to mention, because the original book Vortex is named after I think it's the opening track on John's at the time new album. So when I wrote the first Vortex, I had that album on continuously. And when I tend to write anything for John and Sandy, I listen exclusively to John Carpenter music just to make sure that I'm in the zone, as it were. So all that stuff that Dave's talking about that we grew up with it's part of our DNA by now. We've been playing, watching those worlds for so long that I know we get to play in them. It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know that it has to entertain you and give you that certain feeling, and then you want to elevate it from that feeling to a higher plane because, well, you might have a little bit of a big name on the front cover to live up to, and you know, you want to do it for the fans that are reading the book too.
You know, I found
the other thing is that.
Sorry, mate. Go on.
No, go on. I was just going to say the other thing is because I've been lucky enough to work with John and Sandy on other projects. I know when John's not enjoying something. He's not afraid of telling someone when something's wrong. And you know, it was very nerve-wracking early on when I would pass pages to him, and he would read them, and I was like, be like, "Oh my god, is he going to hate this?" And when he likes something, he tells you, and that's a great feeling. But you also know that he's not lying to you, because I've seen him in situations when someone passes something to him that doesn't do it for him, and he'll just tell them, which is great because you need to know that stuff. So if at any point we were kind of going off the rails or taking it somewhere that wasn't living up to the name on the front cover, then they would steer us back very, very quickly. I think.
Get you back in the zone. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a simplified version of what you were saying there, Will, for me is I have a rule by which I do all my work, which is I'm the customer. And I do something, I make things that I would buy or I would read or I would enjoy looking at. And I think if you take something apart enough and try and deconstruct it enough, you lose the fact that this is supposed to be something that you would enjoy because that's how you got here. That's how all the stuff in your past has built you to this point. So I'm the customer. If I can tell you, hand on heart, when I get the finished issue through of each issue we've worked on, whether it's taken me a month of like staring at it day in and day out, I'm still always thrilled to read that final issue because it's the thing that we've all gone towards to make. And if I treat every job I do as my own customer, then I can't go wrong, really, because that's who we're aiming at anyway. I'm the guy who's going to go out and buy these comics, even if I wasn't making them. So I think it's that unwritten DNA of knowing the thing that you're making. I don't think we think about elevating it to a level where we get customers beyond ourselves, because we're the customers, you know. We're the ones who love these things.
Yeah,
so it's not easy, really.
Well, you've been at it for such an amount of time that you know you just instinctively know. And if you don't know, you will know when John and Sandy tell you,
Oh yeah. This is why they're sort of quite hands off with us in terms of leaving us to get on with what we think works. They're more than happy to step in and speak about things that they want to go in a particular direction, but I wouldn't say that we're untouchable in that way. I like getting feedback. I like getting told that something doesn't work because it's a chance to make it better. But we are very, very lucky after working with other people in the past and working for companies and firms and so on. It's a world of difference working for somebody you know trusts you. It's just sleep at night better. It's just the nicest feeling on earth, you know.
Plus, to be honest, 9 times out of 10, if there's a problem with the panel, it's to do with the writing. It's my fault. We got to go back and pick it apart, and it's usually me that's done something dumb. And as soon as we fix that, it's usually a line here or a line there. It's just, you know, something's going on from the wrong character's point of view, or it's something that we can just move around. So
I like that malleability. I like the fact that Mike's not too stuck in what he wants from the story, to not be open to ideas from anyone. We get ideas from Janice about the lettering, and we think, oh, the hell didn't we think of that? It's nice to be able to be flexible, because Mike changing a panel or doing something to improve on the story, it's not like a massive change for the rest of us.
No,
it's all in, what's the word? It's all for the story. It's all in, you know.
Also, just because we work at different speeds, because I can write faster than Dave draws, so I can be writing issue 4 while Dave's just starting on issue 1. So it gives me that stretch. I've got a little bit of a break from when I wrote the first one, so I can come back with fresh eyes to it, and also it informs where I'm trying to take it as well. So that helps a lot as well. We're constantly moving backwards and forwards within the story.
I think past work and how we've dealt with past work also informs how we can do stuff better. Now, I was going to say quicker, but quicker doesn't matter really, unless you're hitting as long as you're hitting the deadlines. But Mike knows instinctively he should never write anything with horses in, and he should stop writing anything with crowds in. And if he includes the bicycle in something, I'm coming.
Dave and I have done two Western stories now, which he hates me for. We just, I think Dave's just starting drawing it now. I think there's only one horse in this though, Dave. So
those animals have got the stupidest knees in the animal kingdom.
There's a single horse in this one, Dave. So you can't complain. The last one I think had all horses.
I have a funny feeling that horse isn't going to make it through the book.
No, a lot of close-ups on the horse's eye.
One stray bullet is all it takes.
I'm more squeamish with animals for some reason. I'm like, oh no, let's keep the horse okay, but anyone around the horse can explode. That's fine.
Disembowel this, take the head off that. Nothing for the horse. Yeah.
The mine explodes. Everybody inside doesn't make it out.
Apart from the horse, although he is in a big bag, so we can't see his limbs, and he's just essentially a ball because he's a hell of a lot easier to draw that way. Oh, and he's in a snowstorm.
You only have to draw him from the shoulders up. It's a big snowstorm.
There are a few moments where, in the new book, I think, where I do get nice texts from David about 3 a.m. going, "Oh, thank Christ for page 12, panel 6, or whatever," because we might be repeating something. So that there's one scene I'm thinking of where you see someone leaving an installation, and then time passes, and you see someone else re-entering it.
That was
and that's great for Dave because he's already drawn the thing, so he just has to make a few alterations, and that's 2 pages. So I usually get a text saying, "Oh, thank God for that. That's great. That will save me some time." And then, of course, he turns the page and finds out that I've asked him to draw a crowd scene with 800 people or something, and then the next text,
skeletons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of skeletons in this book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. What bones?
And then I then have to pass on all that goodwill to my brother and say, yeah, just take a couple of days for page 21 or something, I'm sorry. When he had to draw, I don't know how many undead in that hall in one of the early issues. He was like, "Oh, okay. Have you got any thoughts on this, Dave?" I said, "No, I just want it out my life. I just want it with you. Get on with it."
Be like drawing the scene in Lord of the Rings where he calls all the dead come flying off the ship. Yeah. Draw all of these dead people into this now.
You see, Mike's actually, the way he writes, anyway, he is in a lot of ways. We're joking about him being cruel, but he is in a lot of ways leaving a lot of it to me. And stupidly, I'm obsessed with getting details in that we probably don't need. You do not need to see how many screws are in the panel on the wall behind someone when they're talking. Yes, Pete. Now those bloody skeletons. You are right, Pete. That's our colorist, my brethren. But
it's because I'm not an artist. So when I write skeleton, I think of a skeleton. I don't think of 180 individual bones that you've got to draw or whatever it is.
Or the office that he sat in and the Lego he's been building before he was skeletonized. And these are the stupid details that we don't need, but that I feel like I'm forced to put in because my brain won't let me leave them alone. I'm currently drawing a train in this thing that Mike's written.
In the Western.
And Jesus, I've researched every train and from the Old West humanly possible. And I'm thinking I'd put it on that gauge rail, but I don't think it was that one at that time. Watch this now. It comes out. Someone's going to be onto me. Listen, mate, you got that train totally wrong. And I'm going to say, I don't care. It's covered in details. I'm fine.
Spaceships are easier, I think.
Spaceships are easier. You can just make them a ball.
We spend a lot of time at the beginning of the book trying to work out how many new ships and space stations and things we'll need. And those are the things that Dave designs and sketches out in advance, and as he says, the stuff that trips us up is things like a mess hall. What the hell does a mess hall look like on a space station a couple of 100 years from now? What details are we going to have? That how do they enter the room? Where's the kitchen going to be? All that kind of stuff kind of goes through Dave's head in a way that it doesn't through mine. I'm just like, well, I need a table and some chairs because that guy on the left is going to explode on the next page. But Dave needs to know where all the entrance and exits are because, who knows what's going to happen later on in the book.
I've got Pete asking, what colour's this box in the corner, Dave? And I'm like, box? That's a vending machine for this very specific product. That costs this much.
Yeah, Dave's the detail guy.
Yeah, unfortunately, I need to break out of that habit.
That's a vending machine for custard and fish sticks for a very specific doctor that's going to be working on the station.
He wouldn't last 2 minutes in our books. He'd be regenerating like six times before he got back in his stupid little box.
No one lasts a long time in our books.
That'd be funny to put in, though. Or you have to draw a mess hall. And by the way, this one guy is alive and everybody else is dead.
There's all of that.
So you got to put in all the details. I had a good chuckle when it was just him and the one dead guy, but the one dead guy had his chest blown out. So he bites the sandwich and it falls back out onto the plate.
Yeah. I should have put a bit more like gunk on that sandwich, I think. You see, I can't go back over old work. I just want to change it.
Well, you can't go back now. Well, you can. Now. Well, you can do it for the complete trade.
Yeah, you see, I think my fiddliness with details is rubbing off on Mike because he'll come back and say, "Isn't that? Do you think we can change that for the trade?" And I'll say, "What? There's a number in the wrong place there, and it's in the middle of like an action scene where a planet's about to explode, and then there's some all sort of stuff's going on." And I'm thinking,
it's like decal change. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that to you, haven't I? Sorry, I apologise. But again, it's the stuff I'd buy. It's like Jeff Darrow and anybody else who's putting like more detail in than you'll ever need. I just love pouring all over that stuff. It's what I want to see in my comics. So why not stick it in the stuff that people are going to buy off us?
Yeah, I mean, I buy books that I like. That I like the look of, and or if it's a character that I really like I really like Constantine, so I've bought everything. Well, his first appearance I have a reprint of because I can't dish out that kind of money, but
one day.
Crossing my fingers.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get a rich girlfriend someday and be like, yeah, I'd really like this book over here.
I always got my eye out for art from the Transformers comics. They were one of the first ones that I sort of actively went out and bought myself as a kid. And then I found out our letterer, Janice, did the lettering in it. And I thought, I don't need any art. I work with someone who worked on Transformers. I'm like, whoa. I'll be happy with that till the day I die.
Yeah. What was like one of the first books that you bought for yourself, Mike?
Well, I grew up here in England. We had 2000 AD from a very, very early age. My grandmother every Saturday morning would turn up from the market with a comic rolled up in a piece of newspaper, which would be given to her by the chap on the market stall. And there was a relaunched Eagle when I was a kid, the old Eagle comic, and there were a few others. But 2000 AD was like my Bible growing up, and I didn't understand comics when I first started reading it. I wasn't thinking that it was put together by human beings. I wasn't thinking about that there were writers and artists. It was the equivalent of a movie or a TV, just straight in. And because I kept them and started collecting them, you then pore over the issues again and again. So you read it for the first time on the Saturday morning. And then come Wednesday, you'll be reading it for like the 8th time because you can't wait. The way 2000 AD worked, there were so many cliffhangers. just an exciting time to be a kid with a comic book. And going back to what Dave was saying about details, it was things like you would get through the story and the plot, and you would appreciate the art. But it's when you went back, and it's why I always thought, especially in 2000 AD and something like Judge Dredd, the city, Mega City 1 was a character in its own right. The detail on the blocks, the people living there in the background were just amazing. So that was it for me as a kid, and that carried on kind of like well into my 20s. I was just, everything was 2000 AD. I've got a Dredd tattoo somewhere on my arm. Yeah, kind of just, you know, that was the thing for me. I know for Dave it was more the Transformers books, right?
Yeah, it was very random when I was young, and I was in the situation of relatives bringing comics back. My dad used to work up in Liverpool, and the comics would come into Liverpool on big ships from the States as packaging for stuff. So a lot of them were damaged when they got here, but it was so rare to get American comics here that we just lapped them up. And then we started to get a run of Dredd for life. We started to get a run of like Marvel UK putting things out, and one of the first regular comics that was going to be available at my age at that time was Transformers, and they started to put out their own stories as well as giving us what was going on in the American pages. They would build off that and go off and spin off into different sort of directions. So that was the first comic I was regularly buying for myself. Got a paper round to go and get the money so I could go every 2 weeks and pick up that. And then whatever else was on the shelf at the time, I'd grab that too. So I was buying all kinds of tat. You know, it was like a Mask and the Thundercats and all this stuff. And none of them really lasted, but they used to do these sort of compilation issues where they'd get an issue of Spider-Man and mix it in with something like Zoids or something bizarre. But the Spider-Man element would be regular. So you'd get to see a lot of other comics as you followed the Spider-Man story. And they were slightly oversized. They were on odd sort of paper stock, but you could get them all the time from every newsagent, which is unfortunately something we've kind of lost in this country at the minute.
Yeah.
You can't really walk into your average corner shop or a supermarket and get a regular subscription, really. That's all.
I didn't even know there was I didn't know there was such a thing as a comic book store until I was like 25. It was, you know, as a kid and a teenager, they were just everywhere. There's a quote from Alan Moore saying when he was a kid, the comics were everywhere. They were like rickets. But you know, we grew up with stuff like Beano and Whizzer and Chips, which are very British, very, very different from what I've seen of American comics around the same period. But we'd also get weird, like the weirdest imported stuff on cheap paper stock. I guess someone would just buy them up and reprint them over here. So again, from the local market, you could get old EC comic reprints. And my parents didn't know what the hell they were buying me. So, you know, at like 8 or 9, I'd be reading these really twisted, messed up horror stories with, you know, women falling out of their clothes and then, you know, men whose heads were flying off here and there. And a lot of revenge stories. I mean, a lot of them were like classic crime, kind of like noir stories with a femme fatale, but then the guy comes back from the dead with an axe and chops everyone up, you know, and just limbs going everywhere. So I'm reading that at the same time that I'm you know, reading, you know, Calvin and Hobbes.
Well, a friend of mine and myself do a once a week podcast called OK Boomer, where all we do is review like old comics. And because you brought it up, last night we went over the book that brought upon the Comic Code Authority, EC Comics Crime Suspense, issue 22.
Nice.
And you got plenty of story to read in there. It was pretty much just like, it was like an illustrated prose novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely different.
I think one of the equivalents I'd say we probably had here was there was a comic called Action, And I think they were doing what Mike was saying about just finding something exciting on the shelf that a 10-year-old kid really would want to see. So one of the main stars in the comic, they had a load of, it's like an anthology. One of the main stars was what do you call it? A shark with a big harpoon in his jaw. And he was like the hero of the story. He would like literally slaughter people and rip them to shreds every week. And your family would pick this off the shelf because it was next to Transformers, or it was next to the Beano or Spider-Man or something like that. And they'd say, "Oh, it's a comic, so it's bound to be for kids."
Yeah.
And they bring it home. And, yeah, it was Hookjaw. Yeah, and those type of comics. You just weirdly, as a kid, you don't really process that it's not for you. It is a comic. It's fun. There's stuff going on in it that you want to see, and it's probably just as fun as seeing Captain America wanging a shield into someone's face. But at the same time, you look back at it and you think, "Geez, that was some violent stuff. Kids in schools and stuff like that." But it's because it's on the shelf. Parents at that time, we had the same thing with videos. You'll know it's probably the same over there, but videos just all went in the same shop. So you'd get E.T., next to that you'd get Phantasm, next to that you'd get Extro, and all the kids are going, "Which one should we get tonight, Mum?" And she'll say, "Oh, just pick one, doesn't matter. It's a video. We'll all watch it." So all the crazy stuff was right next to the stuff for kids. It was all sort of mashed into one thing,
Yeah. My uncle used to bring over every now and again pirate tapes. When we first started getting VHS, he would just bring over a pile, and no one knew what they were, and we just watched them one after the other. And I remember one Saturday we would watch Empire Strikes Back when it was still on at the cinema, but it had Arabic subtitles at the bottom, and the quality was awful. And then enjoyed that. That was great. It was a big twist with Darth Vader. What's next? Oh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Never heard of it. Let's try that. I think that was the first horror movie I watched. I was about 12, and it was like meat hooks.
Is that what it was? Texas Chainsaw?
Yeah. We watched over 2 weekends. I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Alien, Extra. I think the British band horror movie at the time came out, along with Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo and Empire Strikes Back. It was just have some videos to watch from my uncle.
Yeah.
Just bring them over. And it just happened to be on a pile to my left because you dropped his name a couple of times.
Oh, right. Yeah. Great book. I've got that one as well, actually.
It was a little easier to read when my eyes were better. It's got some small print over there. I remember when in the late 60s, early 70s, when they were fighting back and forth because of the comics code, Marvel found their loophole and started putting Savage Soda Corn in magazines, because magazines didn't have to adhere to the same thing. So those the Punisher magazines and Mike Barron wrote quite a few of the lead stories in those, and the Savage Sword of Conan magazines were pretty vile for the time, So it was interesting. I actually bought a small chunk off somebody's collection. The man had passed away, so the wife sold it to a dealer, and the dealer put his entire collection up for sale, priced everything out, and put it in an antique store. Because that's what I was doing. Before I was in the chair, I used to cruise like all the antique stores. I go to my local comic shop at least once or twice a week, but I cruise like the antique stores and the resale stores where people would just trade stuff in and find some gems. And I picked up a big chunk of the original Nova series, and I grabbed the entire run of the original Champions.
Yeah.
But
they were all your versions. They were all the Marvel UK versions.
Oh, right. Okay. I think I find it fun to flick through who was involved with that at the time, because you see that what they're doing now, you know, the Mark Millers of the world and Grant Morrison and people like that. I think Grant Morrison started out on, or one of his early ones was Zoids, actually, the one I mentioned before. But it's fun just seeing that, you know, they've always been there. They've always been in the comics industry in the UK, however small it might have been in comparison to the rest of the world. It's quite nice knowing it was there at that time.
Yeah, like a lot of the early stuff. Like I think all through the 80s and the 90s, I bought anything that Alan Moore worked on.
Yeah.
You know, everybody else was like, "What are you reading, Alan Moore?" "Oh, Watchmen?" "No."
Right.
"I'm reading this." "Who puts that out?" I'm like, some small press company that he probably owns, and it was just, you know, It was like an import, you know, black and white, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah. I struggled with associating names and faces. Well, I still do. Associating names and faces with people in terms of what their work was. I like Mike said earlier, comics were comics, and I was like, oh, okay, this has got a monster in it. I'm going to read that. And it wasn't until much later I'd find out that, you know, a lot of the artists that I admired, oh, they had a name. And yes, I have been following them for years. I just didn't realize. I just knew that I liked the work they were doing. I'm just as bad now in terms of remembering who people are. So, like, walking around the floor of a convention, I won't know who anyone is until I see the work they've got on the table. You know,
see the work, and you won't recognize them, but you'll recognize their work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that was
which will probably mean more to them.
You think? Well, I mean, as a creator, I would never expect anyone to recognize me. So, it would be nice, you're right, if somebody recognized the work, though. In fact, that was instrumental in me discovering what my drawing style was, weirdly enough. After years of drawing for other people, I never really fully sat down and thought, well, what's my drawing style? I've tried to draw like him and like her and whoever else, and I've never really sat and thought what mine is. And I was doing a show once with my work out on display, and this guy walked past and said, "Oh, I like your drawing style." I said, "Oh, what is it? Can you describe it?" And he says, "Come around here." So he takes me to the front of my own table, and he says, "Do you not see it?" And I thought, right, okay. And he'd recognized my work as opposed to me. Not that he should recognize me, you know, never go out. But it was nice to see that somebody spotted something similar across all my work. And ever since he did that, I've kind of relaxed and gone, oh, I actually know what I draw like now. I'm kind of comfortable with it.
Oh, every once in a while I have somebody say, "Oh, I know you." And I'm like, "What? Am I still up on the post office wall?" And they're like, "Oh, no. Because prior to all this, I was a nightclub DJ in this area for like 35 years.
Right.
So I'm like, I see faces, and I'm like, okay.
Who's that?
You know, it's like, see the guys like, "Hey, what's going on, fellas?" See the girls, try to think of something not stupid to say, and you know.
When I went through the nightclub phase in my youth, I could never remember anyone's name, so I just called everyone Yakov. Don't know where it came from, but I still meet guys now who won't tell me their name when I meet them because they know that I know them as Yakov, and it would be embarrassing for them to say it's actually Mark. You know, 30 years later, I'm still calling him the same thing.
Yeah, at least you weren't calling him a slag.
There were a couple.
Yeah, I'm sure there were. See, I told you I was watching Jimmy Carr before the show. So how did you talked about the the way the meetings happen with John and Sandy. The particular plot for this continuation of Vortex. How did that pitch come about?
There's a character in Vortex 1 that was never supposed to survive. I knew what was happening with everyone in it. And I knew what was going to happen to the main guy. I knew what was going to happen to the bad guy. You had this whole supporting cast. Nearly everyone was going to get killed. And one character was supposed to die, I think, in end of issue 2, maybe beginning of issue 3. And I was more surprised than anyone else when she didn't. So I thought that's okay because I like where she's going. We'll kill her off in issue 4 or maybe issue 5, and we get to 8, which is the finale, and she's still standing. And it felt, there's that phrase about killing your darlings, and I really tried, but there's a sequence where I literally wrote her into a corner. She's in a corner with the whole space station exploding around her, and she manages to get away from it. She manages to get out of it, and not in a kind of old 1930s Flash Gordon falling down a pit and then cutting back and finding out there was actually a way for him to get away from that. It was just all character based. Like she wasn't going to go down in that way. So the main thrust for me for wanting to do a second book was to drop her and the couple of survivors from issue 1, from Vortex 1, and just try my damnedest to see if we can kill her off. It's like the whole book is just an attempted murder. You've not got to the end yet, so I won't spoil it. But that's where it came from. It's kind of, do these characters have any life left in them? We didn't want to kind of, beat a dead horse. Didn't want to do a sequel for the sake of it. A lot of it gets wrapped up, but there are a few niggling points about what happens afterwards when the dust settles. Like there's a few people standing and the world has been impacted in a certain way because of this thing that has been discovered. So those were like the minor elements to me that I thought were interesting. Like we can find out how that all progresses, and there's a time jump as well. So it was a chance to pick up, 20 years later to see what these characters were up to. But mostly it was just like I just want to see if we can put this character in a similar kind of situation and see if she gets out again.
I'm writing this book and I'm trying to kill this woman, but she just won't die. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, it
might be the artist. Were you doing the Looney Tune little door behind her so she could sneak out?
Does she look like a horse? She should die.
If she was a centaur, she'd be dead already.
She'd be fast. She'd get away from everything.
Goddamn horses.
How is the Western going, Dave? What page are you on?
I'm not saying publicly. I've almost finished it, Mike. He says. When I first met John, he was playing a concert in the UK in Manchester, and Sandy said, "You should go along and say hello." I said, "Well, I've got tickets anyway, and I'm going to go and see him anyway, to be honest." And we'd had the job for a couple of months, and maybe even a bit longer actually. And both Mike and I well, not us, our respective partners had just had kids. So, the universe was upside down. The house was just like a sea of Lego and stuff like that. I didn't know which way was up. And I hadn't really started the book. I'd done all the preliminary sketches and Mike had got me the script. And so I had enough to go on, but I'd just had like 3 months without sleep. So I was kind of wired. And anyway, we go to see John, and he was very kind enough to invite me back to say hello before he went on, and then just say thanks to him later on when he'd finished. And I don't know about you guys, but you meet your heroes, and I mean, like your real heroes, and something kicks in. It's not necessarily nerves; it's just that you think you're stupid in front of this person, and maybe my intelligence levels have just dropped rapidly. But I go in and I say hello to John and say thanks very much for having us, and it's nice to meet you. And I've not met him as many times as Mike, but I think he's well aware of the effect he's got on people, when he meets them, and he plays with that. So I go in and say like, I go in and he says, "Oh, it's great to meet you, Dave. I'm glad you're here for the show and everything. Where's my pages, man?" And I went, "Oh Christ! Holy my God!" And my blood just froze. I thought I've waited my life to meet this fella, and he's got me. And I went, "I've had a kid." And he starts laughing. He's saying, "It's all right, mate. I'm only messing with you. But where's my pages, man?" And I went, "Not again." So he's laughing away, and I'm thinking, I've got away from. I didn't make a fool of myself there. And then I was telling him that I was talking about my wife being from Japan, and he's saying, "Oh, she's from Japan." He said, "Do you like cinema of Japan and stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, I've seen like Godzilla and stuff." Me not knowing that he's a massive Godzilla fan, and I've just put myself in it again. And he says, "What's the name of that new one? It's Shin Godzilla, isn't it? What does Shin mean?" I said, "Don't know." He said, "How long have you been married to the Japanese girl?" I said, "Oh, years. We've just had a baby." So he's creased up. And I only found out later on it means new Godzilla. I thought, I should have known that. So I kind of looked like a dunce when I first met him, but he was still lovely. So it was a nice meeting.
Gotta love those funny stories.
Yeah.
We had a similar thing with another creator where his artist was also the inker and colorist. She was doing everything, and she was showing off some new pages for an upcoming issue, and she hadn't finished coloring the pages from the prior issue.
Right.
So he's like, "Hey, why don't you show off those new pages you colored?" Well, you see, I got into drawing the new issue, and I haven't quite finished the old one yet. It's like, so then it was a late night one here, so all the chat was lighting up, and everybody's like, "Hey, where's my colored pages? Where's my colored pages?" A couple of people like, "I have my Crayola. Send me a couple."
It's been fun finding out the process with working with Storm King as well. Actually, like previously, if Mike and I have created something, it's literally all been down to us. So, I mean, the very first comic we did together was with a friend of ours, Steve Kilpatrick, and it was just for us. I don't think we ever actually did anything with it. I know Steve went off and did stuff with it, but it was called The Night Bride, and I actually drew that on individual books in a sketchbook in a coffee shop each morning when I was on my way to work. So there was no real process for putting the thing together. It's amazing that it actually finally did get together in the end. But the more you do it, the more you realize that it would probably make sense if I drew everything on the same page, and it would probably make sense if I put them in a folder, and it would probably make sense if those folders were named and not just Untitled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So over time, that technique became something that just Mike and I were using. It was just like, what's in the Dropbox? We know where it is, and we're going to go from there. And then when we started with Storm King, I was very acutely aware that this is a real comic company now. This is these are people who know what they're doing. And I was amazed that they'd got to the same conclusion themselves. There's me thinking that there's a way of working that I don't know about, but because of the way comics are made, everyone naturally finds that way of working anyway. So when I said, what do you guys think about me opening a folder for the inks? And if I get some JPEGs ready for you guys to drop the lettering on and stuff like that, they're all saying, yeah, we do that anyway. It's that's how it works. And I just thought, right, okay, cool. It's nice to meet people who learn as they go along instead of just, here's a random page and I'll color it in a couple of weeks when I get around to it and stuff like that.
And are you doing anything traditional, or are you doing all digital now?
I worked, like I said, when I worked in games and graphic design and stuff, I forced myself to learn how to use a Wacom tablet a long time ago, because I always liked the idea of being able to transfer what I do outside of a computer into a computer. And what I like to do, if possible, is I can't ignore those 25 years of working in Photoshop. It's part of my skill set. It's just something that I do. So I can't really ignore that, really. But what I do like to do is make sure that my digital work looks like my traditional work. And I think it's taken a long time for technology to catch up to the point where the brushes you're using digitally will do the same job as what you're using traditionally. And yes, to answer your question, because I do go on a lot, apologies, I do have that ability to work traditionally, but when I'm faster digitally, it kind of makes sense for what we do to work that way. That doesn't stop me from spending all day drawing a page and then sitting down at 10 o'clock at night thinking, what can I do to relax? And deciding to have a drawer in my sketchbook. It's still there. It's still something I go back to all the time, because you don't have Control Z on a sketchbook. You can't undo a mistake you've made. It's fun to make those mistakes, and it also informs what I do with the digital stuff. I like to make mistakes in the digital stuff. I like to meet. Well, hello, friend. I like I like for those mistakes to stay there, and it's so I would hope that my digital stuff doesn't feel too digital, if that makes sense. I'd like it to feel like I've done it with a pencil, because I have physically drawn it. It's just I don't want it to look too clean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you kind of do. So you would be doing like a rough sketch, kind of like in your sketchbook, working out everything, and then you go right to your computer pad and get down to it.
It's a number of things that inform you as you go along with the creation of the art. It's one thing I've come to rely on more and more is I really need to do character sketches early on with characters in their costumes, because just like I said, when I was with that bloody scar that I just kept missing off, if I don't have that reference in front of me, I will draw them as I feel they look in that scene, and sometimes I might be wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and put elbow pads on because I've forgotten. And having that stuff there around you to inform you when you do it is great, and a lot of that stuff gets done traditionally, because then you can pin it around the room. Are you purring, Mike?
I'm sorry, this cat's wrecking the office.
That's his stomach. He's got the munchies.
You're just really happy.
Now, when you first started in the business, who were you looking up to that influenced you some?
Go on, Mike.
Well, I've already mentioned Alan Moore, who one of the first writers I recognised the name of from 2000 AD when I was a kid. So kind of followed his career throughout. Warren Ellis was a huge influence, and I met Warren a few times, and he helped me out with some of the earlier TV stuff that I was doing. So I owe Warren a huge debt of gratitude for that. And then aside from that, it was, to be honest, it was mostly film and TV stuff that was my focus, and I moved away from comics for years, and I ended up getting quite a few years. I worked in bookstores in London, and I ended up looking after the comic section, and that's when I started to read everything again, and I hadn't really been aware of it as an industry, especially in the UK. Up until that point, when I started getting the books in advance, and I'd get reps coming in, tell me what was coming out, etc. So I got to kind of curate what the few shops that I worked in, the kind of stuff that we were selling. So yeah, so that's when it really changed for me, and everything started to click. That how the industry worked, and I think that's when I picked up things like Preacher and Sandman, and that whole wave of kind of the more adult orientated stuff. Because as a kid, I hadn't really been into the superhero stuff at all. But I picked up, I think my first year at university, I picked up the first series of Hellblazer, which blew me away.
Oh yeah.
And I was into anything that was horror based back then as well. So there was a whole series of Clive Barker's Books of Blood, and it's when I first started going into comic book stores. But I was actually looking just for horror titles at that point. I wasn't very well read. I was very focused on just the horror. And it was only when I was selling the books that I realised how from what my idea of the industry was to kind of how broad it was. So I still don't read many superhero books. I was a big fan of The Walking Dead when that started, and then kind of read more indie stuff than anything else, to be honest. But the stuff that sticks with me, the stuff that I go back to, tends to be Preacher, Sandman, Transmetropolitan, all that stuff.
Mm. The more character-driven stuff, non-superhero.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, I still love a good superhero story, and Alan Moore's done some great ones. But and I enjoy the Marvel movies, and I tend to get, when I get into something, I get bogged down in it. So I want to go back and I want to read everything, and I find that impossible because you pick any superhero, and I've got to go back to 1944 to find out what they were doing during the war. There's just too much history.
Well, if it was a DC hero, they were selling bonds on the cover.
Yeah, and punching Nazis, so that's all good. I can appreciate that. But yeah, I was reading Watchmen, so to me that was kind of like I'd seen how superheroes end, and it felt almost redundant to then go back and read a Superman book after I'd seen Rorschach explode. Or kind of try and take Batman seriously is so I still have problems with like Batman movies. I know everyone loves Batman, but I'm like, as soon as he starts dressing as a bat, he loses me. I really enjoyed The Dark Knight right up until he put the suit on.
You didn't like Arnold as Mr. Freeze? What's wrong with you, man?
Oh,
yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen bits, I've seen clips, but yeah.
I think I blacked out in that.
The whole superhero genre stuff is fine. I get it. I'm glad it's there for the people that are really, really into it. And I do eventually watch everything that's come out. I think I've seen all the Marvel stuff now. I think I've seen all the DC stuff. It's just not really for me.
Well, based on some of the videos you used to hand to me at school, that used to give my mother a heart attack when she found them in my room. It never was your scene, really, was it? I remember my mum coming into my bedroom saying, "Jesus Christ, what's that?" And it was the cover of From Beyond on my shelf with that guy's face melted. I said, "Oh, it's just something Mike give me at school,
Yeah, I think I had to buy Reanimator on VHS about 6 times because I kept lending it out and never getting it back. So Reanimator and From Beyond and all that stuff. But it also goes back to 2000 AD because I grew up reading Judge Dredd, and in Judge Dredd, if you're walking down the street and you spit bubblegum out, he shoots your kneecaps off. and gives you 10 years in prison for it. And I'm reading this when I'm 10, and then you start reading Superman, and it's
It's like, man,
he's too nice. So it didn't get me the same way that reading something like Rogue Trooper and Strontium Jog and all that kind of like British, very cynical, dark, and I think that's why I was drawn to the Vertigo line, because it was a lot of British writers coming over and kind of pushing that in. I remember reading when they were trying to keep those characters in the superhero universes, so it just seemed weird to have John Constantine kind of helping out Batman. It's just having a problem with the Joker. Why don't I bring up a demon who'll turn him inside out for you? That'll sort it out for you.
I always enjoyed Constantine popping in and out of the Swamp Thing series, though.
Oh yeah, that was brilliant. Yeah,
because they pretty much hated each other in like a love-hate relationship, And we were talking last night, because when we were talking about the EC book, like everybody in that book smoked.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, does anybody still smoke? I go, well, Constantine still smokes. He beat the cancer, so he got right back on the stick.
Yeah.
But really, they've taken that out. Even characters that have been smoking their whole. Whoops, we lost him.
Oh, we lost Mike. He'll be back. Don't worry.
Even characters that have been just smoking cigars for the last almost 100 years. Wolverine's been smoking cigars since he came around, and Ben Grimm always had a cigar in his hand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
it was kind of the character, wasn't it? You would always see them like surrounded by the smoke, and it's a lovely thing to play with, drawing smoke too. Speaking of like my influences, while Mike's on a hiatus at the minute, he's probably wrestling that Dalek. There was a guy who used to draw some of the UK Transformers stuff, a guy called Jeff Senior, and it's an odd comic to have sort of like grown up with, thinking that this comic's got the best characters I've ever seen in, because they're all just giant robots having fights all the time. But I did like what they were doing with people like Starscream and Prime and stuff like that. They were just great, interesting characters. The underling of the bad guy who's always trying to undermine him in some way. It's a fun character to have around. But there was a guy called Jeff Senior who used to draw the hell out of Transformers. He was just an absolute delight opening an issue and finding out it was his art in it. He was an influence on me. And there's a lot of comics where I didn't realize they were an influence until years later, and I'll sit down and think, how am I going to draw how this torch shines? And I think, like Walt Simonson did in the Alien, the illustrated story. And I don't realize I'm doing that, but the influence was there. And so I only realized years later who has been a big influence on me. And sometimes it's reflected back to you in the work. And sometimes I miss it totally and have other people point it out. One of the big influences on me was Katsuhiro Otomo, who did Akira.
Mm-hmm.
Another idiot for details. You don't need that much detail, but he puts it in. You don't need that much detail, but he puts it in, and it makes it a whole load of fun to have it there. Jeff Darrow, another one. And again, I don't think I've sat and noted who my influences are, but I enjoy somebody popping up at my table at a convention and saying, it kind of reminds me of this. And I think, it probably does actually. Yeah, I have read that, and I did read it 1,000 times as a kid. I think a big one was Walt Simonson's Alien, the illustrated story. I do mention that a lot if I'm on a podcast over here or something, because it was a big turning point for me in comics, finding that you could get cinematic horror told in telling the same story as a movie, but told in the way that only comics can do it. I like that genre as well. The fact that, don't get me wrong, Alien's a great film, but in my head, the version of Alien in my head is that version that Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson did for Heavy Metal, because that was the version that I read 500 times and couldn't put down. It's kind of ingrained. So there's a lot of influence, I think, in every artist's repertoire. I'd be putting the millions of artists who I admire down by mentioning just a few of them, but I think you can pick something up from virtually everybody and have it influence you. I've done tutoring with 10-year-old kids who've done something, that have drawn something that's had me in stitches, or I think that, what a great idea. I think there's influence everywhere if you're looking for it. You see, that was the easy way of getting out of telling you who my influences were.
And then we didn't find out who we actually looked up to.
That's true.
Well, I was thinking, how Mike was so ingrained in the 2000 AD line.
Yeah.
I think I was the same way with heavy metal and the old Vampirella magazines.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Of course, I was buying the old Vampirella magazines because, I like girls, and that's definitely a girl. So I'm buying this. Oh, and she's kicking some ass. Oh, I like that. I go, this is cool. And, and in the early days of that magazine, it was all high end, people that are, in the gold room of, legendary artists on that book, Frazetta. I had like three names in my head and they just went. Neil Adams did a bunch of stuff there, and then you go over to heavy metal, and you'd catch some like Olivia stuff and some Michael Whalen fantasy stuff, and take Morbius and on down the way, and you just like,
yeah,
and I was yelling because my friend was managing the comic shop. He's now the owner of it. But, when I first discovered Heavy Metal Magazine when I was like in high school, I was like, this is awesome. He goes, oh, yeah, Heavy Metal's the best thing you can buy. I go, why didn't you tell me about this last year? Because I never saw a comic book store until I was like 15.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I didn't know they existed either. And, one day I'm bunking school, walking around downtown, and this guy who had a store like 45 minutes away opened a second store in my town. And it was like a big portion of Main Street ended up becoming a one-way road. And it was just like, offices like all built down, but he rented out a bunch of the little offices, and it was like, a little like 5 and dime storefront looking thing. And I walked by it, and then like, a minute later my brain kicked me in the ass, and I turned to go, was that a comic shop? And I turned around and I was like, oh.
I got that at that same age as well. Actually, I had the standard school hiatus where you're interested in VMXs and girls and stuff like that, and then I bumped into a kid just finished school, so it was like we were 16. I bumped into a kid I was at school with, and he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Just on my way home." He said, "Let's go to the comic shop." I said, "What? We've got a comic shop. My small, like in the middle of nowhere town's got a comic shop." And it was a guy he had a record store, and he'd sell skateboards and stuff like that. Alan's, he's called. Still going today, selling bikes. But he decided to put a comic section down the end of the shop. It wasn't big, but it was when Dark Horse kicked off. So it was all the Aliens comics, Predator, The Mask, Concrete, all that kind of thing. And then you had Grendel going on as well. And there was loads of indie stuff too, like Flaming Carrot and just other mad oddities, and just having that in the town. I'm like, well, does every town have one of these? This is incredible. and we'd gone from, in the UK specifically, we'd gone from like every newsagent, a newsagent being, the corner store or whatever you'd call it, you guys would call it over there. Every one of those newsagents had a lot of comics in them. So there was never any shortage of being able to go in and finding something. And most of them would let you make a subscription because they were regularly getting them in. So it was nothing for them to just say, we'll always order your issue of Transformers or something like that. So I had subscriptions to stuff when I was younger and so on. But that has just taken a nosedive in the UK. That's totally disappeared. So there isn't physically anywhere you can walk to and just find and stumble over comics anymore. And to have that one there when I was a kid and just find out there is a dedicated comic store here, and it's not just the UK stuff, it's everything from the States as well. That was it. The hobby just took off again and stopped since. I was just pocket money. I was just handing it over every week because I just wanted more. And even, I mean, all the comic stores are struggling now, I know that, but it's such a shame knowing that my little lad who's 4 now, if I'm going to get a comic for him, I have to subscribe to it or get online to get it. He's not going to stumble across it in a store and see the cover, and unless we actively go to a comic shop, which is now it's probably a good 20 miles away from where we live. He's not going to be on his way home from school and have 50 pence in his pocket and find a comic. And I think, what all the stuff he's going to miss out on, unless this virus disappears and we can all start rolling around again in the convention scene and he can find it for himself there, really. But I was very very appreciative of that when I was a kid, the fact that there was a place where you could go and you could find it all.
Oh, you just gotta drop the hint in one of the meetings with John. It'd be really great if there was a comic shop in my town.
Yeah. You could put it next to my house, John, don't we? I'd give you some, I'd spend some money there. You could stock it with our stuff.
Stock it with our stuff, and there'll be a line at the door for people asking you to sign the copies. And
I mean, this is not me being the king of sales or anything, but they're doing really fun stuff at Storm King at the minute because they've got like our type of books going on. Ours are in a genre on the site called Tales of Science Fiction. So they rotate those stories under that banner. That's great because we get to see new artists, new writers, different collaborations with people. That stuff's coming out all the time. But they've recently gone into like Storm Kids, specifically aimed comics, horror comics for kids. And yeah, I know that they're around and I know that there's plenty of them, but it's nice to know that they're considering that audience and they're getting good stories out to that audience. And me and Mike are eyeing it like, could we do a kids one? That's going to be brilliant. How are we going to make like horror like for an audience where it's nice to have those limitations? You can't go full on guts eating guts and whatever. You've got to be more creative with it. You've got to think of the audience, and it's quite a nice challenge.
You make it a pop-up book, and then the last page, a big giant squid comes out and eats the kid's face.
Yep, I'd buy 2 of them. Do you think we're going to get Mike back? Because
I think he might have lost his internet, or either that or his cat decided it wasn't happy and chewed all his cords out.
Could well be that. His cats are gigantic. I don't know if you saw the size of it. I think it's a Norwegian forest cat he's got. I always enjoy the fact that my lovely wife grew up in Tokyo and never had pets when she was a kid. So she doesn't really know how to interact with animals, and it's kind of hilarious when she meets them. So if we ever go to Mike's, she'll bow to the cats and say hello, and your heart melts a little bit, And weirdly, they're just like taking it all in. They'll sit and watch it like that. I'll give him a shout. See if we can find him if you want. Hey, Mike.
Yeah, see if we can get him back in for a few minutes to let him finish his thoughts before we.
Can you get back in? There we go. Okay, that's my little pocket computer winging him a message.
Are you reading anything nowadays? Comic wise?
I sort of dip in and out. Weirdly, ironically, if I'm using the word ironic in the correct sense, which I always doubt myself. Ironically, making comics means you don't have a lot of time for comics.
Yeah, I know.
But I do try and jump on stuff if like something takes my eye or something. I read what's the one recently? One of the Joe Hill horror ones. Was it Plunge? I think it was called Plunge. With Stuart Immonen on the art. Mm-hmm. Oh God, that guy can draw like the wind. He's brilliant. It's just sometimes it's just a pleasure to know that writer's working on something and that artist's working on something, and I'll devour it, whatever it is, But it just so happened that I really enjoyed that one. That was a great story. What else? I do a lot of rereading. I do a lot of. I'll go back and visit Lock and Key whenever I get the chance, or Invincible. I like to have those ones. The books that I always recommend to other people who don't read comics are the ones that I will go back to. And Invincible being a great one. It's a great one, but it's also a bad one because I bought all the big volumes of it, so I've got this fantastic collection on the shelf ready to go. And if I recommend it to someone, they say, "Oh, how do I get hold of it?" And I think, God, they're gonna have to borrow mine. So I want to recommend it, but I don't always because they're very precious to me. Those books.
you got to go online and order it for yourself.
Yeah, you've got to go and spend some money to pay the guys who made it. That's what you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
you buy a handful of the $1 reprints of like the first issue to get them hooked on it, and goes search the internet, mate.
Yeah, there are a few. I get a lot of influence from. I should start listening to. Is it Kayfabe? The one of the. Is it a podcast that I've never really looked it up. I've got to be honest. There's a guy who I listen to on a podcast over here on the Awesome Comics podcast, and they deal a lot with indie comics, and they review a hell of a lot of stuff. And I get a lot of my influence from them. And one of the guys on there has talked about kayfabe being an influence to people and recommending books. And if they recommend a book, it suddenly flies off the shelves because everyone wants to go and grab it. Mm-hmm. But the Awesome Comics guys have pointed me in the direction of some really, really nice stuff over the years. One of the recent ones I had was a book called Carthago by Humanoid Comics.
Oh, yeah.
There's we're getting a whole load of great stuff from mainland Europe coming over in the last few years, where they've been books and getting them over to the UK audience. You can't always get them as a physical book, but I've been enjoying just seeing what those guys are putting out. And again, the Awesome Comics guys are great for finding those things, just recommendations. So I tend to follow that. I'm getting a bit more stuff digitally now because I'm running out of room in the house. But I'm dipping in every so often. I wouldn't say I'm buying regularly every week, but I'm dipping in and I'm enjoying it. So, what about yourself?
I just ordered another Kickstarter today because it only makes sense. I bought the first two parts. I might as well have the final part. This young kid, Connor Bartel, lives in Alaska. Yeah. So the shipping is a little wanky. So everybody that lives in like the lower 48 states, he sends a file to this company that operates in Florida. I can't remember the name of it now.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But you can put your book there, like a digital file of your book, and people can pay to download the PDF of it for like a small amount of money. and then for like, $4 or $5 more, they can buy a physical copy, and this company will print to order. So they're like print on demand. So they'll print on demand, package the books, and ship them to you.
That's a great idea, isn't it?
For like one low price, because shipping back and forth to the UK can get pricey. To Australia, Australia is even 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Friend of mine
It always
said,
amazes me that like Australia's got like a good comics community. Again, another podcast, the Rad Lounge, the Radioactive Lounge. One of the guys in there who owns a store, the tales that they have to go through to get comics there. It's I'm glad there's people like that who are passionate enough about it to be doing it. But that's a nice idea.
They sell for a good amount there. I got a friend down there who lives in the Western Province, and he's got a huge collection. Like he'll buy like 2 or 3 covers of stuff, and he'll turn around and post up, and something that just came out like last week, he's already got like signed and remarked editions of it, and original art from Arturo Lugo or various other guys that names from like that you'd be like, you got somebody from heavy metal to draw you like a comic book panel. Oh my god.
Yeah.
It was just crazy, because before all this craziness started, I covered a convention south of Boston, and I got to meet and hang out with Neil Adams, Mike Grell, Mankey, Joe Rubenstein, Bill McKay, and Graham Nolan.
Oh man.
Okay, I'm done dropping names. I was in heaven. Because I was in the chair, so I get the press pass. So they just let me in like an hour early.
Yeah,
which was good, because they put they had a specialty microbrew beer cart like in the middle of Artist Alley. So
right, yeah.
I kicked the day off nice, and I spent like a good 45 minutes to an hour talking to Neil Adams.
Awesome.
So I got him in a good mood before he got all cranky, and and the guy that created the world's greatest superhero line, Marty Abrams, the old Mego 8-inch toys from the 60s and the 70s. Those are back again, and he was there, and Neil drew the original art for the Mego line.
Oh right, did he?
So, and I was talking to Marty. I go, he's like, so what are your plans for the rest of the day now? I go, well, I'm going to head back down the other end and probably go talk to Neil Adams. Neil Adams is here? I go, yeah. He's got the entire corner as you walk in the door. Just walk straight down this aisle. They went down there, and they took a picture together, and then he posted the new picture next to the original picture from like 1972.
Oh, man.
Of them just, sitting together, arms over shoulders and everything. And I'm like,
oh, man.
I go, that's great. I still have some of my original things from back then. Because, when we get older, we want to go back and we want to buy all the stuff that we had as kids to bring back those memories.
Yeah. You can't see my desk at the minute. You can't see the thousands, or what I tell my wife, hundreds that I've spent on plastic nonsense that does not matter, but makes me happy to look at.
Yeah, well, I'm surrounded, and as you probably saw earlier, you can probably make out like a little bit here and there. It looks like I'm in a warehouse because I'm in a refurbished factory, and I've got a 2,400 square foot loft. But back in beginning of 2016, I fell ill. I had sepsis, cellulitis, and fasciitis, and I died.
Whoa.
It's just a flesh wound. I'm better now.
I just don't hear that phrase every day. That's all. I died.
And well, they brought me back a couple of times, and then I coded out when I was in the ICU, because they would take the tube out of my throat, and I'd be okay for a little while, and I'm nothing, and they'd do a trach on me right here.
Yeah.
But because of, I had like 3 18-inch scars going down my right leg.
Yeah.
One on each side and one on the back. And the wounds were about that wide.
Yeah.
So they were changing bandages like every 4 or 5 hours, which hurt like hell. But they had me on a double morphine drip. Morphine is not my friend.
Right.
I was hallucinating for the entire time. And I was paralyzed from the waist down at the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't move my legs, but I still had that nerve impulse feeling, so I thought I was moving my legs.
Yeah.
So they had to put the security stuff on the hospital bed they had me in, because I kept trying to get up and reach for the closet where my clothes were and get the hell out of there. I couldn't walk.
Yeah. Oh,
and
God.
Then they eventually tied me down, fastened me down to the bed, because after 3 or 4 escape attempts of me just making a big thud on the floor.
Yeah.
God. And then they freaked out one day. I actually thought I was the Joker killing Harley Quinn.
Okay.
And I thought I was ripping her throat out. In actuality, I grabbed my trach and I ripped it out of my throat, and I threw it across the room.
All right.
That set off some alarms. 30 doctors came in. I go, "What is it, free golf day today? Can you breathe?" I go, "I'm friggin' talking to you, ain't I?" And they patched me up, and that was the up curve of my my healing. But my good friend at work had, when I was in the coma, packed up all my stuff, my daughter's stuff, my mother, who had passed away a couple of years prior, packed all the stuff up and put it in storage at his house. And I just got it back a couple of weeks ago. It fills a 22-foot long trailer.
Oh, God.
So I've been trying to work in a warehouse, as a cripple, has some strange things, but it's been letting me make what's in the box videos repeatedly, because I have no idea what's in any of these boxes. I'll peek in them and I go, books, okay, I can make one for that. Toys, oh, okay. And everybody wants to see what toys you have. Are you selling that? I don't know. You got cash?
I find if I'm in a situation where we basically cleared out one of our rooms recently to make a bit more room for my son, and the amount of storage that I've had to pay for just to take the crap that I had in that room is insane. And as I'm putting the boxes in storage, thinking, just get it out of my sight. Well, I've got stuff to do. I've got to finish this thing. I've got to work. I've just put this box down. Oh, God, is that a transformer? Oh, I better get that out and play with that for 4 hours. It's dangerous. It's dangerous because I'm finding stuff that I had 30 years ago, and I've realized I think I bought one of those a couple of weeks back for a stupid amount of money, and I've actually still got one. I just didn't know. So it's dangerous going near the old boxes. It's probably best just to chuck everything away and hope for the best.
Yeah, I know. One of these boxes actually has one of the original old Mego Star Trek Enterprise bridge play sets.
Right. Great.
I had one when I was a kid. My mother gave all my stuff away. I had I had the GI Joes when it was just one GI named Joe.
Right.
Not like 75,000 characters.
Yeah.
All little. But I had, and because I was a ginger.
Yeah, me too.
And now I'm just a bald gray guy. And
yeah, I'm loving it too. Yeah, finally a different color.
Yeah, I know. And I didn't have, finally a different color I didn't have to pay for.
Yeah.
My daughter's mother goes, I'm going to the store. You want me to pick you up some Just for Men's? I'm like, for what? For your hair. What hair?
Yeah, exactly.
You still have some here. I go, yeah, I also got some barber clippers in the bathroom. As soon as it starts to grow out a little bit, I shave my head. He goes, why do you keep shaving your head? I go, because it makes me look young. Being bald makes me look younger than, a mat full of gray.
I should have shaved mine for this because I've got a bizarre pattern on the top of my head, where I've got a massive big patch of thick, strong, glorious hair, and then just like nothing around it. But it's in like a weird shape. It's like the Sesame Street guy painting letters on people's heads and stuff. Oh, here he is. He's back again.
Hello. Have I missed anything?
Hello, Mike.
Welcome back.
I'm sorry about that.
You know why you had that patch of hair up there? It's because of that bloody scar.
We're doing the scene from Jaws where we start showing our scars to each other.
Yeah.
I would, but I can't lift my leg high enough for the camera to see.
Apparently he wins, Mike. He's got it's that thick and it's that long. And chicks dig scars, so always remember that.
Oh, a scar. Okay, I was going to leave you two guys to it, but okay.
Well, if you can find me a chick that digs my scars, let me know. I'll pay for shipping.
So we did. Are we still talking about comics?
I think so.
Hey, we've been keeping everything geeky, but we get to talk a little bit toys and various influences. And
if you watch it back later on, Mike, you'll be glad you missed it. It was basically us banging on about what plastic crap we waste our money on.
Oh yeah, I don't buy anything.
he builds it all.
Shh, don't turn around.
Mike's middle name is Davros. So we're down to the final issue of the book, and when does that hit stands?
Good question.
A couple of weeks, right? It's well, I always track of time on lockdown.
Yeah, I got my issue 7 last week. So
yeah, I think it hit Comicology about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's yeah.
Listen to the experts at the marketing.
I know we're useless. Liz will know. Liz will put a link in, but as soon as it appears. But yeah, we should be about a week away, I think.
Mm. Yeah.
And how was it? Without spoilers, of course. How was it like mapping out to end at the 8th issue?
Because we've done it before, there was a lot less panic this time. I think trying to wrap everything up, you suddenly realise about issue 6 or 7 as you're writing them that you've created a lot of little story avenues that you need to go down and tie any loose ends up with. Usually do that just by killing anyone who gets in the way. Where is his story going? Well, if we kill him, we don't need to worry about that too much. But this one was a lot more planned out in advance. The characters didn't get away from me as much. So I knew from issue 1 that we were going to go to a different planet this time, and I knew what was going to happen there. And I wanted to put some callbacks into one of John's favourite movies again. There's a movie called The Trollenberg Terror from the 50s, which is a great black and white sci-fi movie, let down by horrendous special effects. But what's great about the movie is you only see the monster for the last 5 minutes or so, and it's a terrible, terrible looking monster. But up until that point, it's all build up, it's all character, and we wanted to do some throwbacks to that, and it was a big influence on the first book as well. So we got to do that again, and then I also wanted to do a little throwback to Dark Star, because the first book, some of the keener readers picked up that it's set in the same nebula, that region of space, and there's a few other little elements in there that if you read it very closely, you'll notice that we may or may not be in the same universe as John's Dark Star movie, which is one of my favourites. And we didn't really know how that would play out too much early on in the first book, so it was very subtle. But in the second book, we really wanted to kind of put a stamp on that and say, yeah, we are in the same universe, even though it's a very different kind of story. So we brought in one of the elements from Dark Star, and we dropped that in the book this time, just to kind of tick that box. But it was mainly just working out. We just had to get everything lined up so that when things start to unravel, I think both books, the feedback we've had from readers is that they're a little bit of a slow burn at the beginning, and then when the wheels start coming off, like it picks up, and it's kind of like one bad thing after another happening to everyone, which was the plan. You know, we wanted to be a roller coaster, but we wanted that final dip to be the one that not everyone walks away from. So yeah, a lot of fun.
And you kind of just, gave him some notes of, okay, this one dead on page 12, this one dead on page 14.
Well, I get to, we forget that I get to read it in a different format, of course, but I get to read it from a fan point of view as well. Mike sends me the script, and it's been formulated by him and put together by him. So when I read it, I'm reading it as somebody who knows the story, is involved with the characters. I mean, I say these guys, I've worked with these guys, the characters in it, for years now, and I wouldn't say like I'm massively attached, but I've been doing their facial
expressions.
Not anymore, no. But I've been working on their facial expressions and what's going on in their lives for years now. So I was surprised at how much of an emotional connection I've got to not wanting to see bad things happen to these people. So when the final script come in, I don't know if you do this, but I do this with streaming TV shows and with comics, and especially with stuff that my baby son watches. But I'm tempted every so often to just tap that little button and see how much is left on the scroll bar, because I start thinking, they've only got 6 minutes. What are they going to do in that 6 minutes? How are they going to resolve this? And I start to get excited towards the end of a book, knowing that I'm at this point in the story, and if I can figure out how it finishes, it's not as exciting. If I have no idea how it's going to end, I get excited about the story, and I'm literally at page like 20 or something of the last issue, and I'm going, what's he doing? How's that going to go there, and who's going to go? How's he going to resolve this when this is happening on the second to last page? And then we hit the last page, and I don't mind saying I was a bit emotional when I'm reading it. And of course, when you read it the first time, you immediately visualize what it is that you get your first visualization of what that page is going to be like. And I think my visualization was different from Mike's on that last page, and it was the only one that we've ever he's written something and said, "No, I had a thing in mind," and I visualized it, but there's a few sort of panels around what's going on. I'm not saying what's going on, but I couldn't make that work. I couldn't get that last page to work because the emotional hit it gave me in the script, it wasn't giving me in my own work. And I knew what that image needed to be. I just couldn't get it on the page. And eventually Mike said, no, actually, I actually see it working this way. Those panels don't go there. They're going to go there. And it just clicked. And I thought, I know that I'm going to work on this. I know that I'm going to produce something to help this book finish. But it still felt like I was reading it. And it felt like I was getting the benefit of reading it and enjoying the story. So when it clicked on that last page, I did a proper Burt Reynolds in Smoking the Bandit 2, like looking around for the fourth wall camera to see if anyone else just saw that as well. I'm like, you seen this? Have you seen this? It was just a real enjoyable way to finish working on the book, to have a surprise, an ending that wasn't just a surprise, but a very, very satisfying way to see what's gone on with those characters.
I think that's what's nice about having the shared interests and being friends for so long as well, is because we don't just reference horror and sci-fi, although obviously we do that a lot. It's there's an early sequence with a spaceship leaving Earth and with the authorities in pursuit. So it seems natural to, when I mention it to Dave, that panel, we're like, well, we're going to go Smokey and the Bandit with this. And he gets exactly what I'm aiming for, because we're both thinking about the exact same sequence from a film we saw, when we were younger. And we do that a lot. And it was the same with the last page. We just had to start talking about not necessarily a similar sci-fi or horror ending, but just a movie that gave us the same kind of like kick, emotionally, until we were seeing it in the same light.
You can tell them, Mike. It was love. Actually, we can reveal that now. You can tell them. You don't need to be shy. All right.
Okay. but that that happens a lot with the stuff that we do, because I mean I don't think I'm embarrassing Dave by saying you're not the biggest Western fan in the world, whereas I am a huge Western fan, and we've done 2 Western shorts now for Sandy and John, and so again, like with some of it, I have to say, well, here's a sequence from a Sergio Leone movie, or this is the kind of thing I was going for here from a Kevin Costner film or whatever. But mostly the character stuff, it doesn't come from Westerns. It comes from the other stuff that we've seen, whether that's Aliens or Reanimator or whatever the hell we're trying to go for. So it's just nice to have that kind of shorthand with each other.
We make a lot of reference to movies here, and we realise that we are talking about comics and stuff. But I can't deny I've always been a fan of how the two mix, because, like I said before about the Alien comic, I see that as I was talking before, Mike. Sorry, when you.
Sorry, I'll catch up.
The Alien adaptation, Archie Goodwin and Walt Simmonson, and how, as much as I love the movie, the version of the story in my head is probably that, because I just absolutely read it to bits, literally my first copy of it. And so I think the two are informing each other, and especially when our entire childhood wasn't all comics and it wasn't all movies. It was a mixture of all kinds of things. There's influence on TV there as well, and books and music even. And I think embracing all that stuff. This is like we talked before about using Photoshop and working digitally. I just got to a point in my life where I thought, I'm trying to work traditionally, and I know I'm not as fast as I could be in working in Photoshop. And I just got to embrace the things that have made me up until that point and influenced me. And we just very, very easily decided we know a lot about film, so we're going to drag this into what we're doing. And of course, it being for the brand of John Carpenter, it's found a home there, if that makes sense, because that's what he's associated with. Despite the fact that he's got millions of comics out, that's how we know John Carpenter. So bringing films into it, it doesn't feel like a chore,
No, and I think it's one of the things of talking with John and Sandy as well, because we don't discuss their work much. I mean, it obviously comes up, and I'm a huge fan, so I try and have those conversations. But when it comes to the work we're doing together, we talk about everything but John Carpenter films. To be honest, we talk about the stuff that influenced him, or other things that that they've admired, and we end up in the same place, but we've come via a different route. So I think it's very satisfying and gratifying when readers say that it reminds them of something that John's done previously. But at the same time, I think if we sat down and we just tried to do The Thing again, or Prince of Darkness, or whatever it was that we were aiming for, I don't think it'd be as satisfying, because we try and start really from the ground up. We don't try and build on what John's done before. We start in a different place. And I think in the same way that with John's movies, that, you know, he goes back to westerns and the stuff that he loved, and you end up with a movie like Escape from New York, or Assault on Precinct 13, or Ghosts of Mars. They all have those elements of the stuff that he loved, you know, John Wayne movies and sieges and horror movies, that black and white sci-fi. But I think it's the one thing you can look at throughout his career is he doesn't repeat himself, and it's the same with the books. We don't set out to make something very similar that the fans will instantly think it's just a rehash of something that John's done before. We try and make everything unique in some way, and that always comes from the characters as well. Like the situations are kind of crazy, and the far-flung space stuff. But the characters share a common theme, I think, in this and the other shorts that we've done, where it'd be the westerns or the other bits and pieces. You know, it's just putting interesting people in situations that are going to test them, and just sometimes it's not that they fail that test. It's just that they're outmanned, outgunned, whatever it is. But they go out trying. And I think that's the big part of the John Carpenter universe. You know, the underdog and going down swinging is a big element of it.
I think the horse always lives.
God damn that horse! But yeah, but I think that there's a point to go on from what Mike said there, and I noticed this more and more because I've got this 4-year-old in the house. But there's something really primal and fun about taking characters that you want to create a story with, taking a scenario and dropping it into an environment that would make it more fun. So would the thing be anywhere near as interesting if it was set in an office? There's something about the snow and Antarctica that it's a character that adds to the story, and knowing that this is a science fiction thing, you know, you pretty much got a blank canvas. But we really enjoyed, I know I did when I'm making the artwork and designing stuff, the fact that this is quite grounded sci-fi. Yes, we're involved with alien beasties and whatever else, and it does get kind of crazy in some of the later issues, but we're still in what we would hope is a universe that people can relate to. And it's like taking your characters and classic storylines, you know, people who are living with guilt and people who are dropped into situations they might not want to be in, but they're going to do their job and they're going to do it to the best ability they can. Stuff that people relate to, and saying it's on an alien asteroid or it's on a planet that does this or whatever. It's just fun knowing that it's like kids playing with toys. Oh, I've got a car, but what if I took it on the beach? It'd be brilliant. Or what if it went in the snow? That'd be really cool. And that's as much fun for us as adults, you know, as it is for kids playing with toys and moving them around. And
I've got to admit, one of my favorite panels in Vortex 2.0 is a very simple idea. It's like Dave's great at creating these spaceships that don't exist and working out what they look like and how vast, you know, some of the spaces are inside. And we've got a new space station in this book that's much bigger than the first one. And I was trying to work out, well, how do you know, we've got to move around inside of it. And, you know, I guess if I was entrenched in nothing but sci-fi, I'd be thinking about flying cars or maybe some kind of futuristic transit system like they have in Logan's Run, or, you know, something like that. But I ended up settling on an old American Jeep from kind of like World War II and Korea, because I'm a big fan of MASH. And the panel that when Dave sent it through, the initial pencils, the way that he'd captured a Jeep moving through a space station is just one of the best things I've ever seen. And I love stuff like that. One of the first things we did a few years ago, you know, again, far-flung reaches of outer space with giant robots, and we just had a squirrel in a robot's hand. And it's those moments for me, those little kind of touches that, as Dave says, kind of keep us based in a reality that we know, where they'll still have squirrels, they'll still be using old-fashioned mechanical Jeeps because they work. They're easy to assemble and disassemble and get out there and do things in. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun doing that
We were
stuff.
supposed to have flying cars by now, but here we are with the Nissan Note. Yeah, it's not exactly the future yet.
It can't be. We haven't gone outside yet.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on and talking all this time about the book and your career and influences and
Thanks for having us.
Little pieces of plastic, little pieces of plastic, and what have you.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having us.
I gotta tell everybody to make sure if they haven't bought it yet, get all the issues. You can have your local shops back order them. Take about a week to get them in. And I mean, Vortex 2.0. It's a great story. It blew me away. Made me say "holy fuck" a whole bunch of times.
That's what we like.
It did its job. And the art's okay. No, the art's great. The art is fantastic.
I'll tell Mr. Bradstreet.
Oh yeah. I was talking about the covers. The cover,
cool. Thanks very much. Thanks for having us.
The covers were amazing. Thank you so much, and have a great night. The audio version of this will be up, and I'll send it in that email over to Liz, so it'll be tagged to both of you for Twitter and Facebook.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thanks,
looking
Will.
forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night.
Dude.